Yeah, I'm very excited about this subject, and I did not know how. I mean, I knew that cultish. I knew you guys had touched on some of this stuff, but just the massive need there is right now to do really good Christian apologetics in this world, the explosion of interest. It is, and it's not being touched by non-crazy people in many Christian circles. There are people who are, absolutely unhinged, who are saying this is a Christian answer, and I found a lot of syncretism, a lot of really sloppy thinking. And so, man, I was so excited when I found out that Jeff Durbin and the Apologia guys were also interested in this subject. It's just so needed today.
No, you nailed it. And that's, I think the key issue is, and tell me what you think about this. There's 2 points here, and you named one of them, and that's the crazies, the weirdos, people that just go nuts with this stuff. And then, you have, now this is where it gets interesting. You have the lane we need to engage with, where we have to all face down the fact that just last week or the week before last or whatever it was, very, very recently, there was a congressional hearing with 3 people, whistleblowers, not schlubs, not crazies. One is a commander of a military aircraft, one of the best pilots of this last generation, that is the one a part of that whole revelation of this tic-tac UFO, UAP, that defied the laws of physics, that was dropping down from space, hanging out for hours over the water. And then this thing just disappears when they try to chase it to 60 miles away in less than a minute. And, you have footage of this, radar data. And that's what we're learning now is you even get to the point where it's being told to Congress that pilots on the East Coast have to have as part of their training awareness of the UAPs they may encounter. And they're describing UAPs like floating black cubes enclosed in a ball. One that almost got clipped by an airplane by like 50 feet. So they're having like very close calls with some of these things. And the description of these by military pilots is these are things, phenomena that we cannot understand. They're defying what we know about the laws of physics and material science today. Orbs, lights that appear that seem to defy the laws of physics. Again, the radar data from stuff flying above us to the radar data, get this, with submarines and things that are actually happening under the water that defy the laws of physics with orbs and certain things like that. So here's my point. We're going to get into this today and realize that we're not going to do this in such a way as that we're just sort of titillating the senses and just engaging in just sheer speculation. We're dealing with eyewitness evidence, eyewitness testimony, and those sorts of things.
Yes. And that's one of the most important elements, I think, that people often who are maybe not familiar with this subject get wrong pretty quickly, is that if you're going to dismiss all of this as hoaxing or as attention-seeking behavior or crazy people, you really have a high burden of proof to demonstrate that claim when you have so many credible witnesses, so many similar reports across many, many different disciplines, military and outside the military, police officers, housewives, and these reports often carry many similar characteristics. And what we found as we started looking into this subject was we're convinced something is happening. We're convinced that some of these people are absolutely telling the truth, and that some percentage of them are not explicable through, mistaken identification of known aerial phenomena or Venus or, swamp gas type explanations.
Right.
That we really do have some complicated questions to answer when it comes to this phenomena. It's just, I think it's the orb thing alone.
Yeah.
Number of credible reports that we've waded through in the orb phenomena in people that are talking about UFOs, but also just people talking about general paranormal activity. And you find just very credible stories, hard to dismiss, and Christians need answers for these stories.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to just say one more final point on this in terms of why does Congress care? Like, why they just is it just they're excited to hear about something new and intriguing? Well, the main thrust that's been coming before Congress and to government officials is like, look, we have to actually train our pilots on the coast to defend our nation to watch out for these things. Yeah. It's part of their training now. We have confirmed data and reports from the United States and allies and enemies that sometimes they've had encounters with orbs that have appeared over nuclear missile sites, shut down the missile sites, and then disappeared, and then they turn back on again. That's not something that has happened just in the United States of America. It's happened in other places as well. You've got actual footage of military fighter pilots tracking these things, and them you can watch it with your own eyes, them like flipping and turning in the air against the wind, with no apparent propulsion, no propellers, and those sorts of things.
And really that, I think, captures one of the two directions where my mind goes with something like this testimony before Congress and this disclosure process that's being slow rolled, and the narrative that's being constructed in the media and in the political realm as well. I think really there's 2 or 3 witnesses is a legal minimum. So it doesn't actually establish the truth of something if we have 2 or 3 witnesses. We now need, we can now hear the charge, since we have independent lines of witness, and now we can evaluate.
Now we can hear it, yes.
Right, we can evaluate the credibility. Maybe one of the lines of evidence is eyewitness. Maybe there's some forensic evidence, things like that. Multiple independent eyewitnesses is obviously great.
And you know, it's something that, because Brian, I'm so glad you brought it up in that way, is that when you have multiple lines of witness and testimony, it doesn't mean it's true. Mm-hmm. That's really important. A lot of people get that wrong. A lot of people don't know how to read their Bibles and understand the law of God in such a way as to understand that just because 2 or 3 people are saying something doesn't mean it's true. Like Brian said, now it means that, I can receive this testimony to evaluate. Now I can do cross-examination. Now I can actually engage with the witnesses. Now I can try to find out, is this actually the case? Just because they're saying it doesn't make it true. It means now, now I can evaluate.
That's a great point.
And that's really, by the way, pastors, good grief, you better get that down. You better get it down quick. You're going to need that for counseling and dealing with conflict in your church body. So with that, it means that as Christians, when you hear reports from Roswell, from the eyewitnesses on the ground, from the first responders, from the fire department, from the sheriff, from the people who own the land, from the people who say, that's not what happened. What the government is saying happened is not what we actually saw. When you have those witnesses coming forth, like as a Christian, you got to evaluate that without waving the hand at it and saying, no, it was just a balloon. It's like, okay, then why did the journalist report in the newspaper that there was a crashed craft? Why did the first responders say that they came upon the crashed craft? Why did the sheriff say the same thing? Like, what do these people have to gain in this? Why did people disappear who gave their testimony what took place in Roswell? It just means, it's not saying that it happened exactly as they're saying. It's saying that you got to be able to evaluate this without something waving the hand. Because I think as a Christian, here's my point. I guess this is a long way of getting at, I don't like being in a position as a Christian to have such a position of strength to say, here's the clear occultism, and then simply say, but I'm not willing to even look at and examine the things that are being said. Like, for example, the actual footage of this strange object being tracked by a military fighter jet, and it's clear the pilots don't understand what's going on, and there's this thing's defying the laws of physics, and you can't just simply wave the hand at that and say, it's just CGI. I'm sorry. That doesn't cut it. That doesn't cut it for me.
Particularly when I think about, like, one of the driving motives of our show, Haunted Cosmos, it's Proverbs 25:2, that it's the glory of God to conceal things, it's the glory of kings to search things out. We do know that the world that we know is fantastically intricate and astonishing. I mean, I've heard if that we know, like, if you were to convert a single raisin, the energy that is contained in that matter to pure energy, it would be enough to power New York City for some extended period of time. So we know
I gotta eat more raisins.
Seriously, we know things about the world already. It means that who's to say that there aren't absolutely shocking things about, ways to travel vast distances, traversable wormholes. All this stuff sounds tinfoil hat, but then you look at, and I don't know if you're familiar with this example, but it's pretty recent. The investigation in Skinwalker. I keep an ear to the ground because it's so close to home.
Literally.
And literally 2 hours away. And on film, they recently released something they filmed in summer of 2022 of a light orb that materializes, for lack of a better words. It flies into the mesa, the rock mesa plateau there, and then continuous footage, it seems to appear out of the mesa, traveling at 300 miles an hour, and then disappears again after another stretch of time. And this is film that corroborates eyewitness accounts from the 90s and the early 2000s, and before that people have witnessed orbs flying into this rock face and seemingly not to slow down and then come back out. And I look at that and I say, I don't know what that is. I genuinely don't know. Is that some physical phenomena some exotic physics that we are yet to understand that God put in people didn't know how to make silicon into chips and iPhones until pretty recently. And the ancients would consider that, wizardry.
Right.
Is it something like that? Or is this a spiritual phenomena? What's going on? The point is just that the universe God made is intricate, astonishing, because God made it. And he can, he's capable of, feats of glory that we are not even close to comprehending. And so some of this stuff I look at and say, maybe this is just an example of a mystery or a glory that God has concealed that we're yet to understand.
And maybe some of it is actually haunted.
And so, that's right.
Yeah, and that's good. That's why I love that you've chosen that. Great branding, by the way. I love that you've chosen that terminology, because that, I think, it strikes at the main point that I've been trying to make for 2 decades as examining this and talking about it. Haunted in terms of how much we just don't want to think about the influence of the demonic.